History is written by the victors. Not only by those who win wars, but by those who survive long enough to tell the story. Every monument, every textbook, every national myth is shaped by the final outcome. But history is fragile. A single decision, a single delayed order, a single battle won or lost can change everything. What if the Second World War had ended differently? What if Nazi Germany had not collapsed in 1945, but instead emerged as the dominant power of the 20th century? This is not a story meant to glorify or justify. It is a thought experiment, a warning wrapped in imagination. Because power does not disappear when it loses. It adapts, waits, and sometimes returns stronger. In this video, we will trace an alternative timeline. We will examine the real causes of World War II, identify the moments where history could have turned another way, and explore what kind of world might have existed if Germany had ultimately won. A world that may have appeared more orderly, more advanced, and more efficient, but at a cost humanity may not have been prepared to pay. By the end, the question will not be who won the war. The question will be what kind of future that victory created. The Second World War did not begin with gunfire in 1939. It began 20 years earlier, in the ashes of the First World War. Germany emerged from that conflict defeated, humiliated, and economically broken. The Treaty of Versailles stripped the nation of its territories, its military power, and its dignity. Reparations crushed the economy, while political instability poisoned public life. To many Germans, the treaty felt less like peace and more like a punishment designed to last generations. Democracy, fragile and new, struggled to survive under the weight of inflation, unemployment, and social unrest. Trust in institutions eroded rapidly. Then came the Great Depression. Factories shut down. Savings vanished overnight. Millions were left without work or hope. In times of fear, people search for certainty. And certainty often comes in the form of simple answers and strong leaders. Radical movements thrived in this environment. They promised order instead of chaos, unity instead of division, pride instead of shame. Slowly, step by step, extremist ideology transformed resentment into purpose. Europe watched this transformation but underestimated it. The wounds of the previous war were still fresh, and few believed another global conflict was possible or survivable. But history was already moving forward, quietly and relentlessly. War did not come because no one saw it coming. It came because too many chose not to stop it. Western democracies, exhausted by the memory of World War I, adopted a policy of appeasement. They believed that satisfying Germany's demands would preserve peace. Instead, it sent a different message. Each concession reinforced the idea that aggression worked. Borders were redrawn. Armies were rebuilt. International agreements were ignored. The League of Nations proved powerless, its warnings reduced to empty words. Fear played a critical role. Many leaders feared communism more than fascism. Others feared economic collapse. And some feared their own populations, who had no appetite for another war. Germany tested the limits again and again, and each time, the world stepped back. By the time war finally erupted, Europe was already strategically and psychologically unprepared. What followed was not a sudden explosion of violence, but the inevitable result of years of hesitation. When the war began, Germany moved faster than anyone expected. The strategy of blitzkrieg combined speed, coordination, and overwhelming force. Poland collapsed within weeks. France, considered one of Europe's strongest powers, fell in just 6. To the rest of the world, it was shocking. Armies that had prepared for trench warfare faced a new kind of conflict. Mobile, mechanized, and relentless. Communication lines failed. Command structures collapsed. Entire nations were defeated before they could fully respond. German confidence grew with every victory. The regime presented these successes as proof of ideological superiority. For many, it seemed history itself was bending in Germany's favor. At this moment, the war appeared almost decided. Europe stood stunned, watching the rapid dismantling of the old order. In real history, Germany's momentum eventually collapsed. Critical decisions transformed victory into defeat. The invasion of the Soviet Union opened a massive second front. Harsh winters, overstretched supply lines, and fierce resistance drained resources. At the same time, the United States entered the war, bringing unmatched industrial power. Factories produced tanks, planes, and ships at a scale the Axis could not match. Germany found itself fighting enemies with greater manpower, greater resources, and growing coordination. But history is not destiny. These outcomes depended on choices, and choices can be imagined differently. What if Germany had avoided its greatest strategic mistake? What if it had consolidated power instead of overreaching? In this alternate history, Germany delays its invasion of the Soviet Union. Instead of opening a second front, it focuses on consolidating Europe. Resources are redirected toward infrastructure, industry, and advanced research. Air power becomes the priority. Rocket technology advances rapidly. Nuclear research receives sustained funding. Britain, isolated and exhausted, faces relentless pressure. Without sufficient support and with its empire stretched thin, it agrees to a negotiated peace. The war in Europe ends not with surrender, but with compromise. Germany stands dominant, undefeated, confident, and reorganizing the continent in its image. By the mid-1940s, Germany stands as the undisputed power of continental Europe. The war does not end with a single dramatic surrender or a symbolic photograph. Instead, it fades into a series of treaties, ceasefires, and enforced agreements. Exhausted nations accept a new reality because resistance promises only destruction. Some countries become formal allies, allowed limited autonomy in exchange for loyalty. Others are reorganized into protectorates, governed by local administrations, but overseen by German military and political authorities. Borders remain, but sovereignty is hollow. Europe still exists on the map, yet it no longer controls its own destiny. Berlin transforms into the heart of this new order. Massive reconstruction projects reshape cities, railways, and industries. German planners present the Reich not as a conqueror, but as the architect of stability. Propaganda emphasizes peace, productivity, and unity after chaos. There are no parades celebrating liberation, only carefully staged demonstrations of order. Surveillance expands quietly. Opposition movements are dismantled methodically, not brutally, but efficiently. Fear becomes subtle, embedded into everyday life. For many civilians, life appears to improve materially. Food is available. Jobs exist. Streets are safe. And that is precisely how the system secures acceptance. The war is over, but freedom does not return with peace. With Europe firmly under its control, Germany restructures the global order in ways that the real world never experienced. This new world is not unified by ideology, but by strategic necessity. Nations adapt to survive. Germany governs a vast economic and political bloc stretching from the Atlantic to the Caucasus and deep into Africa. Resources, manpower, and trade all flow toward the central power. Infrastructure becomes the visible proof of dominance. Massive highways, rail lines, and industrial hubs all lead back to the core of the new Reich. Across the Atlantic, the United States reassesses its role. After witnessing Germany dominate an entire continent, America withdraws into a safer, more controlled version of itself. Isolationism returns. The U.S. invests heavily in science, industry, and defensive technology, but avoids any direct confrontation that could trigger another world war. The nation grows wealthy, but cautiously, aware that it no longer shapes global politics. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union becomes a different kind of state. Cut off from Europe and denied the victories it once claimed, it transforms into an isolated fortress. Borders harden. Propaganda deepens. The state becomes less ideological and more paranoid. Its purpose is survival, not expansion. This is not the Cold War we know. There is no battle between capitalism and communism, no ideological race for global influence. Instead, the world splits into three spheres: control, independence, and isolation. Germany stands for centralized order. America stands for innovation without intervention. The USSR stands for endurance behind walls. Technology advances quickly, but not for the benefit of humanity. Rockets, computers, early satellites, all used to monitor, to secure, to measure potential threats. The world becomes quieter, stable, predictable. But beneath the calm, tension grows, a cold equilibrium shaped by fear rather than trust. On the surface, this new world appears highly successful. Crime is low. Cities function with remarkable efficiency. Trains arrive on time. Infrastructure is clean, organized, and uniform. For those who experience the chaos of war, this stability is comforting, even desirable. But beneath the structure lies a subtle erosion of humanity. The first thing to fade is choice. People stop asking, "What do I want?" and begin asking, "What is allowed?" Art becomes predictable. Music follows approved patterns. Films are polished and patriotic. Creativity narrows into a safe corridor where no one must question anything. Education shifts from curiosity to discipline. Children are taught order, loyalty, and unity before critical thinking. History is rewritten not with lies, but with omissions. Dangerous ideas are not banned, they simply disappear. Resistance survives only in small, fragile pockets. Hidden literature, coded messages, illegal radio transmissions. Small acts of rebellion, not enough to threaten the system, just enough to remind people that the human spirit still attempts to push through the cracks. The greatest danger in this world is not violence, because violence is rare. The danger is normalization. A system that limits freedom so gently, so quietly, that people no longer notice its absence. This is the moral cost of Germany's victory. A world where peace exists, but freedom does not. A world where the individual fades, and the collective remains. A world where stability feels comforting, and that comfort becomes the trap. By 1970, an entire generation has grown up under the German-led order. To them, this system is not tyranny, it is simply the way the world works. They have never voted, never protested openly, never imagined alternative political futures. The world feels fixed, permanent, unquestionable. Technologically, humanity is far ahead of our timeline. Space stations orbit Earth, operated by joint German and American scientists. A rare collaboration driven by necessity rather than trust. High-speed rail lines connect major European and African cities. Early global communication networks exist, heavily filtered and centrally monitored. But despite progress, cracks begin to appear. Young people feel the weight of conformity. They begin experimenting with identity, hairstyles, fashion, underground music, abstract art. Small cultural rebellions emerge, subtle yet symbolic. These acts are not political but emotional, a quiet refusal to be shaped entirely by the state. Geopolitically, the world is frozen. Germany controls its sphere with bureaucracy and surveillance. America thrives in technological isolation, powerful but cautious. The Soviet Union remains behind walls, suspicious of everyone, including itself. War has not returned. But neither has freedom. Humanity stands in a strange balance, prosperous, advanced, and peaceful, yet spiritually constrained, like a civilization living inside an invisible cage. The question is no longer whether the system works. The question is how long it can contain the human desire to be more than obedient. This alternative world did not collapse in flames. It did not fall to rebellion. It did not fail quickly or dramatically. It endured, efficiently, cleanly, confidently. And that is what makes it frightening. Because the most dangerous systems are not the ones that brutalize people openly. They are the ones that convince people that freedom is optional. That order is enough. That safety matters more than individuality. Our real world is imperfect, chaotic, unpredictable, but it allows debate, creativity, resistance, and reinvention. Those are the forces that move humanity forward, not fear, not obedience. This scenario reminds us of a truth we often forget. Evil does not always look monstrous. Sometimes it looks organized. Sometimes it looks peaceful. Sometimes it looks efficient. The future is shaped not only by wars, but by what societies accept afterward, what they trade, what they tolerate, and what they ignore. And so the final question is not about Germany or the Allies or the past. It is about us. What would you give up in exchange for perfect order? And would you realize the cost before it was too late?